Hey friends, thank you so much for joining us at the Living Marriages podcast. As you've noticed by the episode title, we have one more best of episode as we have gone back into the archives, as we have been doing for the past few weeks. If you've been listening for the last 3 or so weeks, you'll have heard that we have been going back to our favorite episodes from the past year as we've been going through an end-of-life journey with April's father. Just a quick update that April's dad went to be with the Lord this past week, and so we are giving ourselves another week to remember, to grieve, to rest, and to celebrate his life. And so we thank you for your continued prayers and kind words of encouragement and support. We hope you'll enjoy this episode featuring some really simple yet profoundly impactful habits that you can incorporate and that we've been incorporating into our marriage for a long time. And so we hope you'll enjoy, and do join us next week for a brand new episode of the Living Marriages podcast. And I feel like God's been really doing a work of highlighting this for me and you, April. Just the importance of the small, healthy habits that we can do on a daily basis that are so simple, that will bring big yields to our marriages.
Life is hard, but marriage doesn't have to be.
We're Aaron and April Au, marriage mentors and coaches. Yes, marriage is complex, and our selfish human nature both pulls and pushes us apart. But God has so much more for our marriages.
Thank you for joining us at the Living Marriages podcast, where we share stories of hope and learn how God wants to breathe his life, healing, and health into our marriages. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's Tuesday episode. Aaron is just dancing while the music was playing, and I'm all distracted over here. The joys of working together with your spouse.
Yep, it's true.
And that brings us to what we're talking about today, and that's the little things in our marriage that connect us, that we can do on a daily basis, and silly dances like that. As much as I roll my eyes at you, or my one eye, as I tend to do, it's still endearing.
It is. April has a very special one-eyed rule that if you ever get to meet her in person and you do something a little bit silly enough, that gets her to do that. But yeah, April's right. We're going to be looking at the small things that really make the biggest differences in our marriages today. And this was inspired really out of a couple of conversations we had with different friends. Just last week, you would have heard in episode 20, our interview with Kyle Brooks. And Kyle said something so interesting during the rapid fire questions of our interview with him. And you'll, if you've heard it, if you haven't heard it yet, I encourage you to go back here, episode 20. And amongst that great story of God's grace and God's goodness through Kyle and Stephanie's journey through Kyle's cancer and through parenthood, one thing that really kind of caught our attention, I mean, it was all so good, but one thing that stood out for just how small and simple it was when he was talking about an indispensable habit that they have in their marriage. And that was this: it's a simple kiss goodnight every night. No matter how the day has gone, no matter if they were just fighting, Kyle and Stephanie kiss each other goodnight every night.
Yeah, and that's something that's been really important to us too. It's something that I don't remember when it started. I think it's from the very beginning that we always kiss each other goodnight at the end of the day before we go to sleep. And we also talked to our friends, Braden and Kristen, and they were talking about something similar. And they called it honeymoon habits, and how there's just these small, simple, and fun practices that can just really connect you, even in the smallest of ways, and prevent you from drifting apart in your marriage.
That's episode 16 for those keeping track and wanting to check that conversation out with Braden and Kristen of Family Life Canada. And I feel like God's been really doing a work of highlighting this for me and you, April, in our own marriages, but even in the whole thing of bringing living marriages to life here in this podcast. Just the importance of the small, healthy habits that we can do on a daily basis that are so simple, that will bring big yields to our marriages. And I'll be the first to admit that I'm always looking for the big fix. I'm looking for that silver bullet, that one dramatic thing that can change your life and your marriage forever. I don't know if it's because I'm a guy. I don't know if it's because in pastoring, you're just like, oh, I just want to find that one thing I can pray that will just unlock this, or that one thing I can preach that will forever change your life. And God is saying, no, though there are big dramatic conversion experiences, there are road to Damascus things that can happen in our lives. Really, it's in the day-to-day walking with God and with each other that differences are made. And
we also need, I'm just thinking of the story of David and how he didn't just one day decide he was going to fight Goliath.
Right.
God had work to do in him, and he needed to learn and grow. And there were small things that he needed to experience and grow in before he was even ready for that silver bullet experience or stone. Yeah. So we need the small things. Even if you look at, if you want to live a healthy life, you want to be fit, you want to be healthy, you need to make daily choices. You need to choose the apple instead of the chips or the donut. You need to exercise regularly. You can't just exercise every 2 weeks for a couple of hours and hope that change will happen, or have a healthy meal once a week, right? It just, it needs to be consistent.
And I think it's really, this is how God has made us. This is how God has designed us. It's human nature. There's this study, which we'll put a link to in the show notes, from Penn State University, that shows that human beings, in their lived experiences, tend to thrive, and they tend to feel most loved when it's small, and they even call them non-romantic gestures that show compassion, that show that you are loved, that really make a difference to how you feel in a relationship, and how you are received in a relationship, so to speak. And I know Dr. John Gottman, who is a wonderful marriage therapist, I guess you could say, he has this motto for what we can bring to make our marriages healthy. And he talks about small things often. And I think that's something that's come to our attention relatively recently, just as we try and do our marriage, but also invite you, our listeners, into this healthy marriage with each other and with God. And so it's those small things often that I think are really important. And it's really even biblical. If you look at the teachings of Jesus, they get agricultural so often. But how often does he talk about the mustard seed? And it's in the Synoptic Gospels. If you want to find it, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, you'll see Jesus teaching on the mustard seed. And it's just such a powerful picture for the way God has made things, for the kingdom of God, where it's not these huge gestures that make the difference for the kingdom of God. Again, sometimes yes, absolutely, sometimes yes. But it's these small little things, the mustard seed, the tiniest of all seeds, yet which grows into this massive tree, which bears this beautiful fruit, and which also provides shade and shelter for the birds and all these things. But where does it start? It starts in the tiniest of things. And so I think that's our encouragement to ourselves today, and to you, our listeners, is to find.
Yeah, and similar to David, as we're talking about the mustard seed growing into a huge tree, you can't just plant a seed and then hope it'll grow. Right? It needs a few other things too, right? It needs tending, it needs water, it needs sunlight, it needs continuous little things to help it grow into that thriving tree. And the same goes for our marriages too. We can't just plant a little seed and then hope that something will happen, right? We need to take care of it in order for that little seed to grow into a living and thriving marriage.
That's so true. And it's such a good point. And Dr. John Gottman talks about those small acts of tending, to use April's words, He calls that bid and response. And he says that bids are the building blocks of relationships. We'll post a link to an article on this that's really excellent as well. A bid, he talks about, is really just a basic attempt to connect. Just something as small as saying, hello, how are you? And the response is when that bid is accepted and a connection is built by saying, hey, I am good. How are you?
Our kids are really good at making bids.
They
Daddy,
are.
Daddy, look at what I drew. Look at what I drew. Daddy.
Exactly. And that's just, it's a bid for connection. It's a bid to make some meaningful interaction together. And Dr. Gottman goes on to talk about bids kind of like being withdrawals and deposits in your relationship's emotional bank account. And how we're doing, how connected we feel in our marriages, our relationships, I think has a lot to do with how we tend to these bids every day. Are we responding to them? Are we aware that they're taking place? In an article, which we have posted in the show notes, there is a therapist from the Gottman Institute who talks about a couple. We'll just call them Barrett and Tanya, because that's their names in this article. She tells the story of how Tanya and Barrett came into her office thinking that they had quote-unquote communication issues. But what they quickly discovered was that, as she says in the article, that these issues were not, quote, deep-rooted complex problems, but moments of missed receptiveness to each other's bids for connection. Goes on to tell the story of how Tanya would just be so frustrated when Barrett would come home from work. He was busy as a tax attorney, and he'd come home and he'd do what a lot of us do, just plop down in front of the iPad, put on Netflix. And she would say, hey, I'm here. How are you? And he just was so lost in vegging, because that's what he feel he needed and deserved after a long day of work. And it was just in those small missed connections that she began to, you could say, spiral, where she, as Dr. Gottman uses the words, she began to write a script in her own mind that Barrett didn't really care about her. And that began to spiral down and down and down. And so as they began to explore this together, Barrett began to realize, oh, wow, I'm missing my wife's bids for this connection. And so after a few sessions working this out, understanding this, Barrett began to pay attention, and things transformed through the small act of him being receptive and open to her bids. And the story, I'm going to leave the story for you to read in the article, but it's a beautiful thing in which they didn't just come out of this trouble spot in their marriage, but they actually ended up finding ways of thriving further together.
I'm thinking about a bid in our marriage too, is that, and for those of you listening that have young kids, you know that whether it's mom or dad that's home with the kids all day, that when the other spouse gets home, it can often feel like, oh, good, I have help now. Yeah. Here, you take the kids. I need a break.
Right.
And if that's the thing that you say first when you see your spouse walk in the door, it's not a connection, right? And so when we actually met with a counselor a few years ago, and she was, she used the Gottman principles, and she encouraged us to have a special way of greeting each other when we had been apart, to come up with something together that was a way that we could show each other, I love you. I want to be connected with you. Yes, it's been a busy day, but this is important.
So just to share, some of those small little things for April and I are, as she mentioned before, kissing before good night, as Kyle and Stephanie do, making sure we say hello to each other as we come in to the house and have time to greet each other, give each other a quick kiss. Praying the Lord's Prayer together before bed is a really important time of connection.
And one thing that came up for me, and I think we each do this for each other, is in the morning, our kids wake up early, and sometimes you'll just take the boys downstairs and let me rest for a little bit longer, and I return the favor. And that's one big thing for me. When when you see my needs, you know that I need rest, and you take care of our kids. That's really impactful for me, even though it's something small.
So we want to encourage you, our listeners now, to maybe take inventory, take stock, sit down with your spouse if you can, or just on your own. Start to look for the small little things, the habits, the little habits that are already present in your marriage that maybe you weren't aware. Oh, we actually do this. Oh, this is a good thing. And talk about those things. Bring it up. Again, it's so easy to want to look for that one big thing that's going to change everything. But look for what small things are present even now. On the Gottman website, there was a blog that they put up, and we'll post a link to this as well, of listeners to their podcast. The Small Things Often is what that podcast is called. Listeners chimed in with the small things that they noticed that were already present in their marriage. And a couple of them were sort of things like, my husband took all the kids to the park so I could nap. Or one of them cranked up my car and made me coffee. I'm sure that was in a cold environment. One of them was, he walked me home in the rain. One of them, thank you always for listening to me with sincerity. Just small little things that might already be present in your marriage that should give you hope for that connected marriage that you want.
And I would encourage you too, as you're thinking of things that that maybe you're already doing, tell your spouse when they do something that makes you feel loved. When they've accepted, when you've made a bid and they've accepted it, and how that made you feel, because we don't always know what's feels like love for our spouse. And so we need to communicate that. We need to say, hey, when you did this, that was amazing. Thank you so much. And we've talked about that, thanking each other, being grateful for each other and expressing that. And that's a huge part of this, because sometimes we don't recognize bids when they're being made. And rather than Tanya in the story getting bitter about it, we can talk to each other. We don't have to let this story build up in our heads. We can actually communicate that. And
that's so important. So we want to invite you, our listeners as well, to take the time, maybe set aside some time this week. If you are feeling like you have some bids that have gone unresponded to, unfulfilled, you could say, find that time for that safe, honest, and open conversation where you can say, hey, I said hello to you this week and you were so busy in your computer or whatever it was that you missed it, and it made me feel this way. We just encourage you to have that conversation. And so we're going to leave you with those thoughts, and do join us on Thursday for our Thursday thought coming up. That will be episode 23, where we again just have some more time for reflection and prayer on this idea of the small little things in our marriages that God's going to use to grow into a great, beautiful, living marriage.
Thank you for the privilege of journeying with you today as we seek God's best for our marriages.
Before you go, if you've been blessed, challenged, or inspired by what you've heard today, please bless us by hitting the follow button, leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and sharing this podcast with family and friends.
You can also support this nonprofit podcast by making a charitable donation at our website, livingmarriages.com.
Until next time, praying the life, intimacy, and connection of God's love over you and your marriage.